Hey there, Mr. Redder here. Welcome back to another episode of Reddit Podcast Stories, where today, build a fence on my property, have fun digging it up and moving the whole thing. A neighbor hired a contractor to build a wood privacy fence. I came home after the posts were set and immediately suspected the fence posts were on my property. We live in brand new homes, so I asked her to meet me outside with her survey. I had already staked out the property line and it was clear to see the posts were on my property. Before I could say a word, she said, "You can't tell where to put a fence with a survey," which astounded me and left me shaking my head. After a few minutes of trying to explain that a survey is absolutely the way to determine where your fence should be, she threw her hands up and said, "My contractor has my survey," and walked back into her house. The next week, the contractor continued to finish the fence without moving anything. We emailed her, we called her, and she just ghosted us. I paid $900 to have a surveyor do a site visit and write a report that clearly showed the fence was on our property. We sent that to her from our lawyer, and she finally responded, "There must be some mistake." Only after more legal threats did she get her contractor back to move it off our property. Meanwhile, she trash-talked us to anyone she could and labeled us as bullies, and half of the neighborhood is believing her. She won't talk to us, which is actually fine by us, but it really upset us knowing she has created this negative impression of us. I should mention that our lots are pretty small, and we had a very large backyard project done this summer, and the fence was taking up valuable real estate that we needed to fit our pool in. We tried to deal with this in a polite, neighborly way, and she forced us to bring in our lawyer. So, am I the jerk? Edit to add, in the survey I paid for, the fence was measured at 12 inches into our property line. Not an insignificant amount if you ask me. Not the jerk. You did exactly the correct thing. Your neighbor is a thief. She attempted to simply take your property. You own that property. You paid for it and you need it. She's lucky you haven't sued her to recover the cost of the additional survey. Not the jerk. When the neighbor pays your mortgage and taxes with the deed in their name, they can put the fence on your property then. Until then, building anything on your property they don't own is theft and trespassing. My girlfriend doesn't know that I know she plans to leave me and take our daughter with her. Context: we're both 21 and we have a daughter named Allie. We had her on accident at 19. We were only about 2 years into dating, but we've made it work out pretty well. I make solid money and I'm about over a year from applying for my full license in my career. She has been doing online school for a law degree. I'm a big racing guy. It ran in my family as my dad and uncle were as well. My dad passed in an accident when I was 13, so he never got to meet our daughter. However, I got to keep a couple of his old cars, and I've been working on them for years. I've taken them to the local track, and I've even done street racing in certain areas around me. As ridiculous as it sounds, he passed a couple weeks before the newest installment of the Fast and the Furious 7. He loved those movies, and so did I. I guess if anyone knows the legacy around that movie, it does mean a lot to me, even with how ridiculous it is. My girlfriend has never been a big fan of racing. She always understood the importance it has held to me, so she has tried to work with it, but her best friend is in a long-term relationship with my best friend. My best friend got into an accident over the summer racing and flipped his vehicle. He survived and mostly came out all right outside of some bruises and a concussion, but my girlfriend was adamant that I quit doing it. This sparked an ongoing issue with us, which, while I understand her concern, I haven't been in anything nearly close to an accident. I work on all my own stuff, so I know exactly what I'm doing, and she has reasonably said I can't bank on that forever. Which is fair, but I've communicated I'm not ready to give that part of my life up yet. I have so much I want to still do and accomplish that my dad never did. I love running into his old buddies and talking to them, telling me how I'm just like him and how proud he'd be. I raced a couple of weeks ago. Everything went well and fine. However, my best friend reached out to me to tell me that my girlfriend planned on leaving me around New Year's. This was a conversation between her and her best friend, which was relayed back to me by my best friend, which he wasn't supposed to tell me. I do feel conflicted. I get her concern. It was heightened when Allie was born. I know she wants me to let it go, and her concerns are valid. I definitely don't want to make her out to be a villain. I just really don't think I can do that right now. I love my girls too, and I love spending time with them. They're well cared for, and like I said, we're doing much better than most parents our age. At the core of me though, I really wanted to be just like my dad. I even want to explore bike racing. It's hard to let that go for the reasons I've given. However, I never wanted to be an absent parent, because I know what it's like to not have that parent. I guess I have around a month to really think about it. That feels terrifying. Obviously, keeping it to myself, I haven't really talked about it with anyone, so I'm just looking to put it out there. Edit. I would like to say my dad didn't pass from racing. His accident came from a drunk driver when he was coming home from work one night. My dad never got hurt on the track. He was smart. Also, I get people who think I'm being stupid for my life decisions. I never expected people to have my back. However, telling me to sell the cars is pretty disrespectful, and I'll ignore everything else you write. Racing is one thing, but the cars are the only thing I still have of him. It's sad that you think you have time. She's already talking about leaving you, which means she's been thinking about it for a really long time already, which means that emotionally, she's been leaving you for months. And each time you openly disrespect her concerns that she's already expressed to you, you make it easier to let go of loving you. And honestly, it doesn't sound like you love her either. It sounds like you're together because you guys have been making it work, careers, home, parenting, etc. You're both too young to be so unhappy. It's probably why you won't stop chasing the racing adrenaline. So maybe it's best to let her leave, but talk it through and be honest with each other. Be brave and talk to her about it if you really want out. My parents want to give my sister the earrings that my grandma left for me. This whole situation feels surreal to me. When I was 20 years old, I got involved in a complicated relationship / friends with benefits scenario with a guy who's now 40. It was messy, with us being on and off for nearly 5 years. He was clear from the start that he wasn't ready for a committed relationship, while I was hopelessly in love with him. Every time I tried to walk away, he persuaded me to stay, citing that love is free, we have time, and he wasn't ready for commitment. I sought advice from my sister, who's now 42. Her suggestions were terrible, like making him compromise, leaving my things at his place, essentially forcing him into a relationship before it was too late for him to decline. But I couldn't bring myself to do that. I wanted him to love me genuinely, not be trapped. On the last night I spent at his place, he expressed interest in a serious relationship, talked about planned dates, only to vanish forever. It was devastating. He was my first love, and he treated me terribly. 6 months later, my sister arrived home, declaring she had a new boyfriend, something quite common for her. But this time, she claimed he was the one. There was a family dinner to introduce him, excluding me from the occasion as if I wasn't part of the family. While they dined, I ordered pizza and discovered that the guy I had been involved with 6 months prior was at the dinner with my parents and sister. I was stunned, paid for my pizza, and retreated to my room, unable to hold back tears. After the dinner, I confronted my sister in front of our parents, begging her not to be with him and to be loyal to me, her younger sister. She knew who he was. I had shown her pictures, his social media, where he worked, even where he lived. They had never met because he didn't want to introduce me to his family, but she knew who he was and intentionally excluded me from that dinner. She defended herself, claiming they had met by chance after we stopped seeing each other. She knew how much pain I was in during those 6 months. I blamed myself for being naive, thinking if I stayed long enough, he would love me back. It was foolish, I know. My parents sided with her, dismissing our relationship as non-existent. A year and a half has passed. I've been excluded from family gatherings because he would be there, and my family believes I'll bring negativity due to my bitterness. I don't have feelings for him anymore, but I feel betrayed by my sister and parents. He's nothing but a villain in my eyes now. My sister is now 6 months pregnant and has been receiving special treatment due to her age. She plans to move in with him in a couple of months after the baby is born. Then they'll get married. In our culture, it's customary for a woman who gives birth to return or stay with her mother for support during the early months. Recently, my sister's friends threw her a surprise baby shower at our house. I was there and tried to engage with them, feeling sad that our once close relationship had deteriorated. However, they treated me as if I were the cause of all the chaos, a homewrecker, or someone trying to steal my sister's partner. I had already been planning to move out, saving money for my own place. But after that incident, I left immediately to a friend's house, and I'm currently in the process of finding my own place. 2 days ago, my parents asked for a talk. They informed me that the diamond earrings our grandma left will be given to my sister. Grandma had entrusted my parents to give me those earrings without a will, mentioning that they were to be mine once I was mature enough to appreciate and care for our family heirloom. But now, they believe my sister should have them since she's getting married first and having the first great-grandchild. I'm furious. They're snatching something that rightfully belongs to me based on my grandma's wishes. It's heartbreaking to even consider cutting off my family, but their actions have hurt me deeply. Fighting over material possessions feels trivial, but these earrings were entrusted to me by my grandma. They're not entitled to them. After being excluded and feeling wronged for 2 years, I've given my parents an ultimatum. Honor my grandma's wishes and give me the earrings as intended, or I'll sever ties with them forever. It's painful to think about disconnecting from my family, but their continual disregard for my feelings and grandmother's intentions has pushed me to this point. Get your hands on those earrings and keep them safe. They are yours and should be in your possession by now. Ask nicely, then if she doesn't give them up, tell her you will sue, then do it. Am I the jerk for refusing to make lasagna for Christmas after what my mother-in-law did last year? I, 30 female, have been together with my husband Michael, who's 31, for 7 years, married for 3 and dating for 4. My mother-in-law, 58 female, has always hosted Christmas ever since I've known him. I've always made lasagna for Christmas and other special occasions. I'm essentially the family lasagna maker, and I honestly don't really mind since I love to cook and bake. However, last year my mother-in-law decided to make lasagna based off what she saw me doing when she was at my house and a recipe that she got off the internet. I was surprised that she prepared a pan of her own, but didn't say anything and even got a small piece. It did not taste good, and it was barely touched, whilst mine had almost half gone near the end of the dinner. That infuriated my mother-in-law, and she wound up doing a rant about how everyone loves me more than her and tried to throw my lasagna in the trash. I say tried because it mainly ended up on the floor. Michael and I quickly left after that, and my mother-in-law has not apologized for it since. Yesterday, she called me to confirm what I was making for Christmas this year, and on her list of things I should make was lasagna. I politely said I wasn't going to make lasagna due to last year's incident, and I'd be happy to make anything else. My mother-in-law wasn't as polite and called me vindictive for refusing to make the lasagna over a small mistake. I just refused again, and it made my mother-in-law angrier, so she told me that unless I show up with lasagna in hand, she wouldn't let me be at the Christmas celebration. My husband says it's easier to just make the lasagna and keep the peace, and I shouldn't hold my mother-in-law's mistake that she made out of anger against her. Word got to my sister-in-law and brother-in-law from my mother-in-law, and they're saying I should also make it, even if it's just half of what I would usually make. You could take a different tack. Tell everyone that after what happened last Christmas, you've decided not to bring your lasagna this year because of the tension it caused. Add that it was actually a bit of a relief not to have to bring one because it's hard work to get it to come out right. If you are not welcome without a lasagna, then wish them a wonderful holiday party, and maybe next year you'll feel ready to make it again and attend. Am I the jerk for asking my son to bring my 6-week-old granddaughter to visit me without his fiancé? I'm 51, female. My son is 29, and he and his fiancée, Jen, have a 6-week-old daughter, Lily. She also has a 7-year-old son that is not my son's kid, but I still consider him my grandbaby. I used to get along really well with Jen and told everyone she was like a daughter to me. But when she got pregnant, she started acting weird towards me. Like, I asked to be in the room for delivery, and she said a clipped no, despite letting her 7-year-old son's dad's mom in the room for his delivery. No big deal, it's her choice. But when I went to visit in the hospital afterwards, she acted really put off that I was there. I figured she was just tired and left after 20 minutes to give her space, but then it continued. I've stopped in to see everyone about 5 times since she had the baby, and every single time that I walk in, she gets really quiet. Whenever I'm holding the baby, she is hovering. She keeps snapping at me over small things, like how I'm holding the baby. Had her on my belly, on my arm, or sideways across my knees on her belly. Because, she's crying. Obviously she doesn't like that, so stop. Or snapping at me for things I say to the baby. Like when she starts fussing, I said, "You won't get your own way with me. You can't play me like that." In a baby voice, trying to calm her. And she goes, "She's 4 weeks old. How exactly is she playing you?" Then she got livid and actually kicked me out of the house one time because she picked up the baby for making the smallest of noises, and I told her the baby was going to get used to being held all the time if she kept doing that. And she said, "Well, it's a good thing she's my kid, and I don't have to listen to your crying it out BS." Well, I went there on Thanksgiving, and apparently it was her mother's first time meeting the baby, and of course the baby was all smiles and loved her grandma. But when I got the chance to hold the baby, she immediately started screaming and was promptly taken from me. I feel very slighted. I asked my son if he would bring the baby to visit me without his fiancée, because I feel like his fiance's attitude towards me is the reason why the baby screams every time I hold her. I definitely think she's picking up on the hostility. I don't know why she even dislikes me now, but asking her currently would be pointless. He told me he absolutely would not bring his daughter to my place without her mother because he wouldn't do that to his fiancée, who has never been away from the baby thus far. I told him they were purposely ruining my chance at a relationship with my granddaughter, and he said that wasn't true and that I need to stop pushing my old-fashioned beliefs, which is the first time I've heard of this. Am I the jerk for expecting him to bring my granddaughter to me without her mom so I can have a relationship with her? You don't know why she dislikes you? You never heard anyone saying you were pushing your beliefs before? Really? Because I've been reading this for 30 seconds and I know exactly why she dislikes you, and it's because you're pushing your beliefs on her. You're the jerk. You're making this whole situation about you. Let them be a family together. Let them set the rules for how the baby is cared for unless they're doing something objectively dangerous. You might spoil the baby if you pick her up is not objectively dangerous. Let go of how you were deprived of what you seem to think is your right to be present at one of the most vulnerable moments of her life. You can't ruin a relationship with a 6-week-old baby, but you're well on your way to ruining the relationships with your son and daughter-in-law. Back off if you ever hope to be welcome in their lives. I would be unsurprised if OP is also the type who thinks she's helping when she's doing what she wants and not what's needed. I felt secondhand embarrassment just reading this post. How embarrassing to be so out of touch and pushing parenting practices that have been shown to be harmful. You're the jerk. Sorry. Telling your future daughter-in-law that she shouldn't hold the baby all the time because the baby is going to get used to it incorporated 3 errors, and it seems like you didn't notice any of them. So I would guess that you have done a lot of other problematic things you haven't noticed, and this is raising your future daughter-in-law's hackles. The first error you made, in that one instance, you criticized her parenting. Never criticize a child-in-law's parenting unless it's something very serious. The second error you made was that you used "I'm older and know better" logic to contradict her. That never goes down well because it comes across as controlling. But also, modern parents generally believe that parenting techniques have improved over the decades, so your old-fashioned advice is going to be assumed to be wrong. You might as well tell her to not use a car seat. That's how credible she will take your outdated parenting advice to be. The third error you made, and possibly the worst, is that you treated her like she has no idea how to be a mom when she actually already has a 7-year-old. This isn't her first time around the block, and you ignoring that will be taken correctly to be demeaning. I totally feel for you. I'm a mom with no daughters, only sons. Although I've made huge efforts to include my in-laws in my kids' lives, I definitely see that most mothers don't make the same effort, and some are pretty active about centering all their activities on their own parents and excluding their husband's parents. So I could easily be in your situation in the future. At the same time, I also see the ways my mother-in-law and father-in-law, albeit nice people, have undermined me and demeaned me in their zeal to be the authority over our grandkids and center of all things, and I can totally understand how life-sucking that is for a daughter-in-law. Take notes of everything you say in the meeting? Okay, but it'll get you fired. So this happened a few years ago, and I'll be vague since I'm still not sure if the dust is fully settled from this fiasco yet. At my former company, I was the secretary for a small improvement team that would meet monthly to discuss issues within the company and brainstorm ways to fix them. Something you need to know about me is that I was given this role because people know I'm meticulous at keeping records due to HR-related issues I had at a previous place of employment. I don't think my boss realized that this careful record-keeping applied to her as well, especially when she appointed me to be secretary of this little committee, but I digress. I was a model employee, award-winning, and went above and beyond what was asked, as were many others in my department, but we were still having customer complaints and dealt with regular safety issues due to the company at large and through no fault of our own. When we brought these concerns to our boss's attention, emails were left unread, and during in-person exchanges, we were called whiny, needy, and were told that we needed to just deal with it. Whatever the issue was, from items being stolen by customers to people being unhappy with the procedures the boss had set down for us to follow, it was always made to somehow be our fault. When we sought support from other departments, we were met with cold indifference, since the boss was great to them and we must be exaggerating the things she said to us. Well, during an improvement meeting at the end of the fiscal year, it all came to a head. Myself and a couple of my team members dug our heels in and were insistent about the unresolved issues the boss refused to acknowledge, and she finally went off on us. She told us everyone was incompetent, didn't deserve our jobs, and that maybe customers would like us more if we were more likable. When people pressed her on safety issues, she continued to reiterate that we would just have to deal with it, and that if someone was going to get hurt, they already would have, right? I, as a secretary, did my duty and took notes of all that happened over the course of that meeting. I usually did bullet points, but that night I was feeling a little more thorough, so I wrote down words. Every word that was said, every hateful comment, denial of accountability, and idle threat was recorded in black and white. Now, a second part of my job was to distribute the notes from the improvement meeting to the rest of the company. So, come the next morning, I ran about 100 copies of the transcript of the meeting and hand-delivered them to every single department in the building, and things blew up. People from other departments who had attended the meeting were able to verify that everything I had typed up had really been said, and folks were mad, threatening to quit, refusing to do their normal duties, browsing Indeed during work, etc. My boss's boss, who worked at headquarters, so I didn't get the opportunity to hand her a copy, got word of what had been said only a few hours after I had handed these out, and had a long conversation with me about the safety issues I had documented, all the concerns I had submitted to management and writing, and all the records I had regarding my boss's inaction. She was very grateful for the 100 pages of documentation I sent over and thanked me for my time. The day after I unleashed Pandora's box, I put in my 2 weeks' notice, took a new job, and pieced out to greener pastures. At first, it seemed like things were calming down after I left, but the following year, the company did not renew my boss's contract. I still feel a bit bad because I wasn't trying to get her fired or ruin her life. I was just desperate for some accountability thrown her way to create some positive change in the company. But at the end of the day, I just did what she had asked me to do. Revenge on Know-It-All ER Doctor. The day of my 28th birthday, I wound up in the ER because all weekend long I'd been dealing with nausea, dizziness, fever, and lower right quadrant abdominal pain that all just kept getting worse. When I got back to see a doc, I described my symptoms, for the umpteenth time of course, since they never seem to read the notes, and the doc orders a CBC before he even starts the exam. He of course then starts poking and prodding at my abdomen, which I do my best to relax and breathe through. I still wind up making pain noises, but I do my best to let him do the exam without hurting him back. I know that other women can verify the annual physicals can be extremely painful for some of us, but we've learned to deal with it. For me, I was told that tensing up would make it worse, so I should practice breathing through the exam and doing my best to relax my whole body. By 28, I'd had lots of practice. You'll see why I mention it very shortly. The doctor went off to do whatever he needed to do while he waited for the blood work to come back. Once he read the report, he wandered back over to me. He tells me that my white cell count was only slightly elevated, and that since I wasn't tensing up much when he was poking and prodding, that he didn't think it was appendicitis. I explained to him my history of painful exams and also let him know that my body likes to hide things. For example, I was dealing with massive back pain, and they only found out that my back was actually broken when they decided to go in and do a fusion. It never showed on the scans. Fast forward about 20 minutes later of arguing back and forth. Doc, I could go in and do an exploratory, but if I'm gonna do that, I may as well just take out your appendix while I'm in there. Me, okay, let's do that. I have a request though. Can I have my appendix in a jar so I can see it? Sure, I can do that. No problem. I wind up in surgery at 4 a.m. the next day. Once I'm fully awake after surgery, the nurse tells me what happened. I guess they didn't care much for this doctor's attitude either. The day after that, the doc is doing rounds with med students in tow and comes to my room. Cue petty revenge. Me, hey doc, where's my appendix? Doc, I'll come back later and talk to you about it. Me, you're here now, just tell me. Well, we got lucky. How so? We managed to get it out right before it burst. Wow, I guess you'll learn to pay more attention to what your patients tell you instead of acting like you know everything just because you have a medical degree. Edit. The doc in the ER was actually the surgeon on duty, not just a standard ER doctor. No clue why he was dealing with my case from beginning to end. It may be as simple as boredom on his part, or he had just finished up a consult. I have no idea. I refer to him as the ER doc because I was in the ER and he's the only doctor I dealt with. So ER and doc just stick together in my head. Am I the jerk for ruining a kid's Christmas because I refused to sell my doll? I, 36 female, love thrifting. I'm also a kid at heart, so this summer when I found several bags of American Girl doll clothes, I bought them. I collect old dolls that sometimes need clothes, but was really hoping an American Girl doll would show up. Against all odds, one did show up on the shelf a few weeks later. As a kid, I always wanted one so badly, but they had been pretty expensive, so I never got one. I paid $35, took her home, and enjoyed dressing her up. My son joined in, dressing up as Stuffies. It was so cute that I took a pic and put it on Facebook. Also, while researching her, I found out my doll is just like you, number 11, which are a bit rare and go for $100 to $300 online. Always fun to find valuable things at the thrift store for cheap. Fast forward to today. A few days after Black Friday, I got tagged in a friend of a friend's post. Kay is asking if anyone has an American Girl doll to sell. She had tried to buy one online for Black Friday, but couldn't find anything within her price range. I instantly had Kay in my DMs offering me $50 for my doll. I declined, telling her that I don't know why my friend tagged me because my doll isn't for sale. She replied about how she had promised her 6-year-old granddaughter, Mia, a doll for Christmas. She was now worried if she ordered a more expensive doll online, it wouldn't get to her in time, and offered me $70. I again declined and said my doll was something I had wanted during Christmas as a kid and waited a long time for. Kay immediately countered, "See, you know what it's like not getting the doll you wanted so badly. Please, you could make this Christmas so special for Mia. You can use the money to get a brand new one." I thought about it, I really did, but I told her no thanks. Finding mine at the thrift shop felt special, like it was meant to be. I suggested if she was worried about the doll not getting to her in time, she could get one of the much cheaper American Girl knockoffs at Walmart and have it ready just in case, and return it if the American Girl doll makes it in time. Kay didn't want to get a cheap doll. She then switched tactics, asking me if I would even be able to look at my doll again, knowing that not selling her meant I ruined Christmas for a 6-year-old. Yes, I can, Kay, because when you decide to be manipulative is where I draw the line. I immediately blocked her. Maybe this makes me the jerk, but I don't really care. I'm sorry, little Mia. I hope you can get the doll of your dreams someday. Not the jerk in any way, shape, or form. You never offered it, never said to anyone you'd be looking at selling it. You didn't ruin Christmas. It's the lady who's the jerk, because I genuinely feel like there's no harm in asking if you're interested, seeing as someone tagged you in it, and then offering an amount, but pushing it after being told no is wrong. And to be fair, if she knew it was that big of a deal, she should have been looking for one way earlier. My Karen girlfriend refuses to cook extra breakfast for me. I, 27 male, have been living with my girlfriend, who's 29 female, for several months now. For the most part, things are really good, and I plan to propose soon and hopefully have at least a couple of kids with her. However, we've run up against a conflict. She's an absolute morning person. I hate mornings. By the time I force myself out of bed in the morning and into the shower, she's already been up for at least 30 minutes, even though she has to be at work later than I do, and is at the stove making breakfast. She likes to make a huge breakfast in the morning. She usually has eggs, either French toast or pancakes, hash browns or breakfast potatoes, and sausage or bacon. Sometimes on weekends it's ham or steak. She eats almost nothing for lunch and usually has a small dinner, but she loves a huge breakfast. Meanwhile, I only ever have cold cereal for breakfast, or maybe if I'm feeling really ambitious, some instant oatmeal and orange juice. I only even start to come alive halfway through my second cup of coffee and definitely don't feel like cooking in the morning. However, my girlfriend obviously does. So recently, I asked her if she'd start making breakfast for me too. She asked if we were going to trade off and if I'd sometimes make breakfast for her too. I told her no, but reminded her that I do often make dinner for her. She said that since we trade off making dinner, we should trade off making breakfast too. I told her that there's no way I'll ever be able to muster that kind of energy first thing in the morning, but that since she obviously can, that she should just make me breakfast too. I said that it would take next to no extra effort on her part to throw in a couple more eggs, strips of bacon, an extra portion of hash browns, etc., since she's already doing it for herself anyway. But it started a fight, with her saying that it wasn't fair for me to expect her to think of me in the morning since I don't do the same for her. She seems to think that her making breakfast for me should figure into our division of labor and that I should do something extra in return. But I think that since she makes a huge breakfast for herself every morning anyway, that throwing an extra portion of whatever she's making on for me would take next to no effort on her part, So why should I have to do more for her in return than I already do? You're the jerk. Oh, so we'll take turns making breakfast for each other? No, you'll just make food for me. It's no extra effort for you anyways. The cheek on you. Dude should have offered to make dinner every night in exchange for breakfast every morning from her. The only way I could see this as not the jerk is if OP was down to make dinner as often, or in my personal opinion, more often, as the girlfriend makes breakfast. Come on, OP. Obviously, you're aware of the energy required to do things like make breakfast in the morning, so you should be at least willing to reciprocate later in the day. I'd be tucking her in, kissing her goodnight, and reading her a bedtime story if I could wake up to bacon and eggs some mornings. You're talking about proposing and having kids? Will she never get a morning off from the kids because you hate mornings? She's already up, so she should be the one to pack bags and lunches and cook everyone's breakfast? She's naturally feeding, so you never need to cover the night wake-ups. She's home earlier often, and that's the person who starts dinner and picks up the kids and deals with the homework, but you're totally doing 50-50. She's washing her clothes anyway, so it's no extra effort to put yours in, then fold them and put them away because she's doing that for the rest of the load, right? It sounds like she already feels like she's doing more, and now you're asking for something else. If it would require effort and energy for you to do it, it requires effort and energy for her to do it. This may be a small amount of additional energy for this one thing, but it makes me wonder if she's already feeling that she's putting out significantly more effort for household duties as it stands. Oh, and you're the jerk. Dude's girlfriend gets up early and makes herself a big breakfast every day. He asks her to make a little extra for him, and she flips out and refuses to do it. You're the jerk for staying with someone who treats you like this. There are actually women out there who would be happy to put a few extra eggs on in the morning so you can have something to eat too. But you definitely won't find them here on Reddit. Best part is, imagine if the roles were flipped. My husband gets up early and makes a huge breakfast just for himself every morning. I asked if he'd be willing to make a little extra for me, and he refuses to do it. All of you hypocrites would be telling her to divorce him and that she deserves better. Then you'd have the pathetic thirsty dudes commenting how they wish they could cook her breakfast since her boyfriend doesn't. They always pop up somewhere. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or his girlfriend? Please let us know. It breaks my heart how transactional relationships have become. Want revenge by paying in pennies? Here, let me count these for you. Ages ago, I worked a frontline job at City Hall, registering cars and dogs and collecting money for parking tickets, property taxes, and the like. So, a basic entry-level municipal finance grunt, bottom of the food chain, nowhere close to being the one making the ordinances or rules, just a grunt. This was before the days of taking credit cards and debit cards for such payments, before smartphones, before the online banking world really began. Ages ago. Paper, paper, paper. The city's ordinance on tax interest stated that interest would accrue daily against any past due tax bill at a rate of blah blah blah. Property taxes were due quarterly. Many people would come in to pay cash on the tax due date. Many, many more would remit their payments by checks through the mail. We kept extremely thorough paper records of all payments received through the mail, retaining their remittance stub, the envelope bearing the postmark, which was the date we would use to calculate any interest if it arrived past the due date. If the postmark was before or on the due date, no interest was charged. These were batched daily by each clerk, filed by date in our vault, so anyone who needed to could find any receipt or remittance fairly quickly. We needed to, often, as did the city auditor. Anyway, business as usual, and the few days following the tax due, we would always get a few stragglers through the mail, and the daily interest would have started adding up. Not by a lot. For most homeowners, this would only amount to just a few cents a day. We would send them a receipt in the mail with a note that they have a small balance now due to accrued interest, but we would hold it at the amount for 10 days. Most people would just send another check, some would ignore it, and others would come to pay it in person. Finally, the stars aligned and I got one. A real jerk of a gentleman who was extremely disgruntled that he got a bill in the mail for this horrible interest BS, which he slapped down on the counter inches away from me. He then slammed a repurposed melatonin bottle full of pennies down on top of the paper and said, "I hope whoever sent me this bill has to count these pennies," at top volume for all of the City Hall to hear. I could tell already that it was mine. I saw my initials on the receipt when he slapped it down. Cue malicious compliance. I smiled as big as I could, said I would find out who had processed it, and took his receipt to the vault. I didn't even give him enough time to react. I just got up and went to the vault while cheerfully saying, "It'll just be a minute," before disappearing from his sight. I found the paperwork, including his 2 days late postmarked envelope. Then I sat down at my desk, took the melatonin bottle, looked him in the eye, and said, "You're in luck today, sir. I'm the one who sent this balance due to you, so I will be able to count these pennies for you." And I did. I counted all 39 of those pennies, and I counted them one by one, very, very thoroughly. It took him about 20 minutes to pay his 39 cents from the minute that bottle hit the counter to the end of it. I was extremely pleasant and cordial and smiling at him the entire time. It was just fun at that point, so I kept pouring it on. Just so sweet. His face was practically purple by the end, and as he slunk out the door, without the smug satisfaction he was expecting when he slammed that bottle on my counter, I said, "Have a great rest of your day. Weather's beautiful." And it was. Do this next. Tap here on your screen to come see our new podcast playlist, where you'll find thousands of hours of the best stories you've ever heard. Or tap the one on the right. That episode is specifically just for you, based on other videos you've enjoyed the most.